Hi, everybody. Welcome to our workshop this evening on how to become an effective water citizen. My name is Randy Solomon, and I'm the Executive Director of Sustainable Jersey, and I'm going to be your host and moderator tonight. We have an excellent panel. The focus of the session tonight is, again, how to become an effective water citizen. So we're going to be thinking about the different ways that you can engage to try to make a difference on water issues from the state and local perspectives, how to engage with local government, how to do projects, how to work with nonprofits, how to volunteer on your Sustainable Jersey Green team, and everything in between. Tonight we have Marion Glenn, who is a trustee with the Rahway River Watershed Association and a professor emerita at Seton Hall University, and Anthony Diaz, who's the co-founder of the Newark Water Coalition, and also Isabella Castiglione, who's the outreach manager at the Pinelands Preservation Alliance. And yes, she did coach me on how to pronounce her name. I asked her to before the session. I want to apologize in advance and ask for your forbearance for the presumed eventual disruptions that we're going to have, if not from somebody else's kids, family, dog, friend, my family. And so, but I think one of the fun things about Zoom is it gives us little windows into people's lives as we do these sessions. So I'm going to lead off tonight, and I'm going to give a presentation from the perspective of Sustainable Jersey and tell you about the work that we're doing and ways that can help you engage locally. I think most people are probably pretty familiar with Sustainable Jersey. We're a statewide nonprofit, and we work with municipalities as well as schools to try to solve our most pressing sustainability challenges. And we provide tools, trainings, financial incentives to support local governments and communities as they try to become sustainable. We try to get them to implement the best practices that we have developed working with local stakeholders, experts through a kind of a governance and task force process. And all of our stuff is completely free of charge. You don't have to be in Sustainable Jersey to use it. Having said that, over 80% of the state's municipalities and 90% of the population are in a Sustainable Jersey town. We also give out grants every year in numerous different cycles to municipalities and schools to help them implement the strategies. And we recognize that local governments are strapped. They are overwhelmed with the challenges that they have to deal with, both in terms of staff, personnel, time, and money. And they're not just waiting around to implement all the new things that we think up for them to implement with all the time and money that they don't have. And so a big focus of our program is to provide resources to help them implement, again, whether it's staff, expertise, and even money and grants. The Sustainable Jersey is probably known as a certification program. If a municipality or a school implements the actions in our program, and that's kind of what we call the programs, policies, ordinances, et cetera, that we want, that we think municipalities could and should implement. We call them actions. If they implement enough of them, they score points in a point system and they can get certified. About a little less than half the state is certified at different levels. We are in the process of developing what we call a gold star standard in water, which is essentially going above and beyond our regular certification and saying, if you have done everything that you need to do, everything that could be done, given the authority that exists at the local level to address your water issues, you can achieve our gold star standard in water. And in addition to just being providing this recognition as a really high achieving local government, it's a roadmap for what to do. You don't have to be working towards getting the certification to get a lot of value out of this, because it's going to give you the nuts and bolts of what you can do and, in our opinion, probably should do to try to address your water issues. So it starts with a framework for gold. Essentially, what are the things we want you to do? Here are the actions. Here's the sequence. And then there's a municipal water story, which I'll talk a bit more about. And the water story is essentially we want you to tell your story, to understand what your story is of where your water comes from and where it goes and what your issues are, and create that story together with the public, and then tell that story publicly. And that is the key setup for implementing the strategies. And then the third thing I'm going to talk about is the updates to our new actions, which are the strategies. And I think I don't need to spend much time on this, given the audience and the excellent conference that we've all been participating in over the last couple of days. But local governments are struggling with an array of water issues in kind of all facets of water, from drinking water to storm water and surface water, flooding, sewage. We've got all the problems, and they're all manifesting. Sustainable Jersey has a formal goal as part of our vision for sustainability of what we want to see in the state. And we would like to see New Jersey's water system provide an adequate and affordable supply of clean and safe drinking water for everyone, while also safeguarding water sources to ensure sufficient quality and supply to support healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. So that's our vision for water. And our gold star standard in water defines what we think needs to happen at the local level for us to achieve this statewide goal. So the framework for our gold star standard in water starts with implementing four actions, four of these strategies. One is the water story, which I mentioned. And the second is an environmental resource inventory, which I think most people know about, but it's something that environmental commissions and local governments do to really understand, the natural resources in the community and how to manage them. We also want them to prepare essentially a navigational path. It's kind of a little bit of a pun, but really this navigational path is we didn't want to say roadmap because it's water, so we said navigational path. But essentially it is your strategic plan and your roadmap of the things that you're going to implement in the future to become sustainable in water. These 4 prerequisite actions that you have to implement, and I'll show what some of those actions are. They don't mean that you're sustainable. They mean you've made a good start. So we want you also to sort of tell us, okay, we've made a good start, but also here are the things that we're going to do in the future that will get us there. And then we will review it, bring in outside experts if needed, and if we think it meets our standards, you'll get certified. And the gold star in water lasts for 3 years, in which case you have to come back and show us if you've actually made progress by implementing the stuff on your navigational path. As I mentioned before, the water story is the seminal action, the first step, and it's 2 parts really. It's a narrative that you tell about your community, and there's data. It can be quite technical, but we call it a narrative because we want it to be public facing. We don't want it to be a planner's plan. We want it to be a public plan. And it has to be done through a public process where you're creating the narrative with people, but you're also reporting it out in a way that's going to engage them. But it does have, again, the technical elements of kind of a plan that identifies your issues. Do you have flooding? Do you have lead in your pipes? Do you have whatever it may be? You're going to identify those issues and give people, and probably the people who are writing the plan might not know all the answers off the top of their heads. Give folks a fundamental sense of where their water comes from, what might be threatening it, where their water goes, whether it be rainwater or storm water or sewage, and what happens to it, and what are the consequences of that, and how their water story also fits in with the broader regional water story. And so that also includes engaging with nonprofit partners, hopefully watershed associations that can tell them, sort of as a municipality, here's where you fit into the broader water story of your watershed and of the state, and what you can do to sort of impact these broader goals. A couple of the actions. So we've got new drinking water actions. One is private well outreach and testing, so trying to get more wells tested and more people protected. It's a good one for the Pinelands. Removing lead in drinking water, which is a statewide issue, are just two of them. And we have an update to our water conservation and education program action, which has been in the program for a while, but is now significantly improved. Other actions we'd like municipalities to take. We have a new enhanced stormwater management control ordinance. I think many people know that the state just came out with new stormwater rules, and these actually go beyond those stormwater rules. And there are some municipalities who have already started the process, and a couple that have already implemented things that would score points according to this. I think we're going to hear from Marion and probably Isabella as well about green infrastructure. So when you listen to what they have to say and you get inspired and you go do the things they want you to do, you can probably get points within the Sustainable Jersey program for having done that. So we award points for implementing individual installations, green infrastructure installations, and I won't spend time defining it because they're going to do that. And in addition, you can score points, and we really encourage you to take a holistic approach to thinking about green infrastructure. So how much impervious coverage do you have in your community? What percentage of it is paved? Where's that water going? Where are the impaired water bodies? And how much green infrastructure, and where are the critical places you would need to put green infrastructure to really make a difference in flooding, water quality, biodiversity, and other key aspects. So I encourage everyone to go to sustainablejersey.com, and there you can see all of these actions and more in exquisite detail. We give the models and the templates and the write-ups, really detailed guidance on each of these. And again, it's all free of charge as a resource. And if you're not currently involved in Sustainable Jersey, I encourage you to do so. It's free to join for any town. You can also go on our website and you can see which towns are involved and which towns aren't. And if your town is involved, you can join the green team and start pushing them to implement this stuff. And if they're not involved, you can talk to the mayor and council and say, hey, let's join Sustainable Jersey, and I'm going to volunteer to make some stuff happen. And that is it for me. And now I'm going to turn it over to Marion Glenn, and she can give, Marion, if you could please just introduce yourself briefly, and you can give your presentation.
All right, thanks, Randy. And I guess we'll switch to my slides. Hi, everybody out there. I can't see you, but I hope you can hear me.
And I see your slides coming up.
Here come the slides.
Yep.
So you can see in this picture that we are all of us are water citizens in a literal sort of way. So the question is, how do we become effective water citizens? So on the next slide, I am a green infrastructure champion. 2 years ago, I attended a series of workshops that were presented by Rutgers Cooperative Extension Water Resources Program, led by Dr. Krista Brupta and the landscape architect Tobiah Horton. And currently, there are 83 of us green infrastructure champions who have completed this program. And we're all over the state of New Jersey as informed communicators. People that are involved in the program come from 28 different municipalities in the state. There were 3 representatives of counties. 7 people came from high schools or colleges. 6 non-governmental groups who had representatives in this program, and 20 people who have their own private businesses. So you can see it's a wide assortment of different sorts of people, all of us working as informed communicators to manage water using green infrastructure. On the next slide, please. Thank you. So in our region, we have plenty of rain. Unfortunately, most of it runs off and it's pumped down pipes. It goes away. We never see it again. It gets into the ocean. If we have too much water, it can cause floods. And so people have experienced stormwater as a problem to be gotten rid of. Next slide, please. Green infrastructure champions think about water as a resource. We've learned to think about water differently, a resource to be captured and conserved. Water that sinks into the ground is important to replenish wells and reservoirs, to keep rivers flowing during dry spells. Water is something that we need to collect and conserve. And trees, these trees you see here, they're amazing. They are like water pumps. They soak up water and they give off water vapor into the atmosphere. So they are an important part of the water cycle. Their leaves help to slow down a driving rain so that the water doesn't wash away the soil. And of course, on a sunny day, they can provide shade. They can serve as sources of oxygen, and they soak up carbon dioxide. So this slide here shows you that as we move from a natural situation to a more developed situation, the amount of water that goes into the ground, that's absorbed into the ground, gets to be less and less, and more of it is runoff, which ends up eventually flowing into rivers and into the ocean. So green infrastructure is a change in our attitude towards stormwater that's matching a change in our environment. Rainstorms are becoming increasingly intense. On the next slide, please. Impervious covers are becoming much more. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back to the other slide? Thanks. These impervious covers are becoming much more frequent, from 10% in a natural ecosystem to 55% impervious cover in an urban setting. So the more impervious cover there is, the more rain runs off and needs to be captured by green infrastructure, rather than going down pipes and ending up in the rivers and the bays. All right, next slide, please. Can you move to the next? Thank you. This is the simplest kind of green infrastructure. You simply divert a downspout from the roof. So instead of going into a pipe and being piped away, it can go out onto the lawn. This sort of disconnection is a very simple kind of green infrastructure, but it's not that effective. Don't absorb a lot of water. On the next slide, we see something that is a much more effective method. What you do for this is to excavate a narrow basin, fill it with sand and compost, plant some native species, and you call it a rain garden. It's designed to capture and detain the runoff from 2 or 3 inches of rain. That's a lot of rain, and allow it to infiltrate into the ground over the course of 24 hours. These bioretention basins are classic examples of green infrastructure. They filter out the pollutants from the water as it sinks into the ground, and their plants provide habitat to birds and pollinators. Starting in March of next year, towns must update their development ordinances to require green infrastructure methods to manage stormwater. As our environment has changed, the Department of Environmental Protection in New Jersey has changed its rules for managing stormwater. As informed communicators, green infrastructure champions can help their communities understand green infrastructure and help to plan and implement it. Now, I got involved installing a rain garden about 4 years ago when Rutgers built some demonstration rain gardens in my town. Next slide, please. I saw right away that there's a lot more to a rain garden than meets the eye. This is not a typical garden. It's a piece of engineering. There's a lot of underground preparation. Digging out a basin 2 feet deep with a flat bottom is best done with an excavator. Preparing the soil mix that made of sand and compost is no trivial matter. On the next slide, installing the overflow drain requires skills. So I signed up for the Green Infrastructure Champion program because I could see that I wasn't going to be able to communicate effectively about this sort of project until I learned more about it. On the next slide, please. So this, I don't know how well you can read it, but I'll read it to you. This is what Green Infrastructure Champions are able to do for their communities. First of all, we enhance our knowledge through green infrastructure workshops, seminars, and personal research. And Rutgers offers 10 of these workshops for free. I'll tell you more about it as we go on. We engage community leaders to adopt green infrastructure as a stormwater management solution by updating their ordinances and the municipal master plans. We can encourage local non-governmental organizations and schools to incorporate green infrastructure in their existing landscaping. And we can help secure funding for green infrastructure. We can publicize implementation of green infrastructure through social networks, social media, and other channels. So by participating in this program, it gave me the confidence to mention to our city engineer that I'd like to get involved in looking for possible sites for green infrastructure. He already had some ideas, and he introduced me to the Director of Public Works, and they assigned some people to help us put in a rain garden. Next slide, please.
Hey, Marion, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we're at 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll finish up quickly. I teamed up with another Summit resident who was in the second cohort of champions, and we designed a small rain garden to catch water from a new driveway. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The Department of Public Works helped us build it. In the next slide. And now I'm working with Rutgers to design a larger rain garden to capture water from the new parking lot that was connected to this driveway. Next slide, please. So we champions got even more inspired and suggested an even bigger project on a 5-acre hillside next to the city's community center. We notified key city staff who gathered outside with Chris Abrupta and Tobiah Horton and explained how Rutgers could help. They assigned the project to 3 senior landscape architecture students who visited us working on the design. Now, I hope that you are inspired too. Next slide. You can become a green infrastructure champion. The next set of webinars begins on January 15th, and I will put on the chat the link that's on the bottom of this slide in case you would like to sign up for that. It's all online, so you don't have to travel. And I hope that you'll be interested in joining this group of people that are informed communicators. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marion. I just want to remind people that you are welcome and encouraged to post in the chat. And I see also there's a Q&A feature and a chat. I'm not sure which one we're supposed to use for questions at the end. So I'll monitor both of them. We're going to save all the questions to the end, though, and then at the end we'll go through them and try to get to them all and invite the panel to discuss and comment on all of them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Diaz. Take it away, sir.
Hello, thank you very much for that, Randy, and thank you to all the presenters who are on the panel with me today. My name is Anthony Diaz, and I'm the co-founder of the Newark Water Coalition. We are a community grassroots organization based in the city of Newark, New Jersey. We're one of the organizations on the front lines tackling the lead crisis that the city of Newark is facing, along with many others. A lot of our work centers around water distributions. That's like the heart and soul of our organization, is to distribute clean water to residents anywhere in the city of Newark who want to get clean water. We're also starting to do lead testing. We're really excited about that, to do independent lead testing and offer that throughout the city of Newark as well. I will drop the information in the chat as well if you wanted to reach out to us for any reasons or have any questions or follow us on social media as well. So I would say the first question is, what is a water citizen to you? You know, there's so many different aspects around centering water, right? That the presenters that show today, again, show the different like municipal level, personal level, what you can do in your community. But I think for me, the aspect is like, or I answer this question from the personal level, right? Being one of the community organizers on this issue, I really had to understand the issue of water. You know, everybody has heard that cliche, water is life, and we hear it tossed about and tossed around many times. But for me, the Newark Water Coalition has completely transformed my life. And the more I learn about water, the more I know that I don't know about water. And there's so many different ways to tackle this issue. There's so many ways to, there's so much knowledge out there, and there's so many varying communities. You know, the water issues in Flint differ from the water issues in Newark, differ from the water issues on tribal lands that differ from water issues in, you know, Denmark, South Carolina, Martin County, Kentucky. You know, there's just so many different portions and pieces to this puzzle that is water. And I think that's what's beautiful about it, right? So if you want to be an effective water citizen, I think that you have to approach it from a level of like, well, how do I want to get involved in this struggle? What is it that I want to learn from this struggle? What, you know, what is my role in this fight to, you know, being an effective water citizen? So I would say the first step is to just do it, right? You just jump into the pool and get involved, get mixed in. You know, you're not going to be successful at first. You might, if you're lucky. You might go through a lot of hardships. You might go through a lot of successes and failures in this, but I guarantee you'll learn so much. In this fight, I've learned so much about the environment, so much about lead testing, so much about like just the infrastructure pieces, the policy and the legislative components around the water issue that, you know, sometimes it can be scary. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. But I assure you, you know, just take it bit by bit, piece by piece. One of the places that we got started as an organization when we were doing our research was the DEP. There's so much good information out there. You just have to do your research. And I know, you know, I'm not a fan of Excel sheets, but that's why infographics exist. This is why you can get the information you want in a way that's digestible for not only for you, but for your community. You know, some of the things that I know folks tell me all the time is like, oh, this is boring. I can't relate to this data, or I can't relate to these metrics. But the data and the science is so, so important, right? In this era where, you know, fake news exists and these concepts, you have to really ground yourself in what is it that the numbers show you. And one of the things that I push as being an effective water citizen is to make sure that the narratives of my community are reflective of the data that's being displayed, right? That intersectionality of those two components is what really makes our organization special and what really drives home, this aspect of like why clean water is so important, right? Because that is probably the crux at all of us who are involved in any type of water or environmental justice fight, is that we kind of fundamentally understand the importance of water, right? For us, when we say water is life, it means way, way different things than just a casual cliche. And then I would say, because there's so many different aspects to being a water citizen, don't limit yourself, right? One of the things I share often is that Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. We all understand that that's in the context of, violence and defending yourself. But I also take it in the concept of like, you must be innovative. You must be creative. You must use your imagination and really, really do things that people didn't ever thought possible. I love the water gardens or the rain gardens and things like that. Like, I want one of those in my community. That's something I never thought of having before. And just having these presentations, you learn that there's so many different ways to get involved in kind of environmental justice work and water work, right? So don't limit yourself. You can and it's not, if it hasn't been done already, it's possible for you to do this work in a way that, is a game changer. Be revolutionary in your actions. Because, one of the things I was not going to touch on, but how water is now being traded publicly or on Wall Street. And for me, that's very hurtful, because water is life, water is a human right, and everyone should have access to this, whether or not they have the money. I would say the events and the things that are out there, I think is so important. There's so many different groups doing great work. You can focus on like statewide groups, national groups, hyper-local groups such as the Newark Water Coalition. Shameless plug, we always need volunteers. We always need folks to help out. So again, for me, just get involved, right? Don't overthink it. Don't create boundaries for yourself. If you really, really feel important, and you do because you're on a Excel event at 5 o'clock on the evening on a Thursday, so you definitely care about this topic. So now it does a disservice to you to just take what you learn here and not share it. One of the things I share all the time is like, your network is wide and your network is big, right? So you might know somebody who's already involved in this work, or I should say you do, because you know the four of us here on this panel. So get involved, right? We have so many different needs from our organizations, and we do this work in different ways that there's no reason for you not to get involved. So becoming an effective water citizen, just do it. Really just do it. Just get in, and I guarantee you that this work will change your life. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. That was great. And now for our final speaker, I'm going to turn it over to Isabella.
Thank you. Hey, so I'm Isabella Castiglione, and I work with both the Pinelands Preservation Alliance and the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions on our South Jersey Landscape Makeover program. Our goal with the program is to help communities get green stormwater infrastructure projects in the ground, and this involves both some outreach for education and awareness, and it also involves building the green stormwater infrastructure projects. So if you're here, you probably know this by now, or actually know it precisely because Marianne spoke about all the benefits that rain gardens have. But when we're building rain gardens, we really like these in our landscape makeover program. There are a lot of bang for your buck in terms of restoring the natural environment and managing your stormwater. So I'm hoping to give you some ideas of how you can implement green stormwater infrastructure in your community, kind of based off of what we're doing in our program. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we considered with the landscape makeover program is what geography we wanted to be working in. And we narrowed this down to the overlap of the Kirkwood-Cohansey Aquifer, the Pinelands, and the Delaware River watershed. So the aquifer, especially within the Pinelands, is shallow and unconfined and particularly susceptible to pollution. And it is the resource that most of us in the region rely on for drinking water, for agriculture, and for recreation. So it's a really important resource, as you know, again, if you're here. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of partners in this program, and there's a lot of similar work going on in the watershed for protecting water quality. So by focusing our efforts here in the municipalities and the sub-watersheds that are shown on this map, we're able to scale up our cumulative impact by targeting these places that you see, where our partners are also working. Next slide, please. So Rutgers has created these wonderful impervious cover assessments and reduction action plans that you can find on their website. And we've used these to kind of figure out exactly where we want to be doing our work. So this is a map of Evesham, which is like south central New Jersey. It's one of the municipalities where we do our work, and this has just helped us, all in red is the impervious cover where water is not currently soaking in, and it helps us figure out where our projects will be most effective for protecting water quality. Next slide, please. So the next thing that we considered was who is using or managing the land within the target area. Some of our project part agriculture, and that is an important part of this, but the part that I'm talking about tonight mostly focuses on homeowners and municipalities. So that brings us to the question of how to connect with those people and how to get them to become program partners. Next slide, please. So what do we actually offer these people? To begin, we offer with guidance and education. We really want our program partners to understand why and where green stormwater infrastructure is a good choice and how it works. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then we offer assistance with installation. So Rutgers creates the site plans and designs, and then we work with the municipalities to manage the actual project installations once we have that technical piece in place. So there's also a homeowner portion of the program where homeowners, if they build a rain garden, they get a rebate of $3 per square foot. So Rutgers creates, again, the site plan for them. They do offer some assistance for that, and then we send them a rebate for completing the project that essentially covers the plants and the mulch. Next slide, please. Little bit of how we do our promoting. It is a lot of outreach to get people to understand the program and to understand that they can participate in it. So we've done door-to-door canvassing, targeted mailings, email and social media, and we've had a lot of luck, probably our best success, finding partners who are already established in the community and then working with them to do outreach. So they've already got the trust of the community. They already have ideas of where there are existing issues. So they're really a good choice to work with. That would be like your homeowners associations, environmental commissions, green teams, and as we heard from Randy, they're probably interested in doing some of this work anyway because they might be participating in Sustainable Jersey. Next slide, please. This is just an example of one of the direct mailings that we did. So, and now my dogs are going to bark, so that's good. So on the front of this, it gives people instructions as to ways that they can take action at home to be a better water citizen. And then on the back of this, we included an invitation to participate in the program. So they really can't escape the messaging. Next slide, please. These are some examples of social media promos that we created, and they're just made to be easy things that we can send out to all of our program partners, and then everyone can reshare it to their own audiences, reducing the workload on everyone, and then hopefully keeping a cohesive look altogether. Next slide, please. So once we get those partners who are interested, we walk them through the process and show them examples of what the project might look like. So Rutgers creates these very pretty renderings that really help people to imagine what a rain garden could look like, especially if they've never seen one before. And we want to work to address all of their questions and the concerns from the beginning, so they don't get to the end of the project and say, what am I dealing with? Like, want to make sure we've got it all covered from the beginning. Next slide, please. We always have our partners sign a rain garden maintenance agreement that spells out the long-term care of the garden. Again, that's important for making sure that they, all the expectations are clear from the beginning. And it doesn't guarantee that they're going to follow what we've spelled out here. So monitoring the projects, checking back in on them is always important as well. And that's not, malicious. It's just people get busy, they get distracted. So you got to go back and follow up with your projects. Next slide, please. So in any given project, we try to bring community members in to participate. Especially the planting is a great time to do this. I can tell you that at this particular project, the kids really loved getting out and getting their hands in the dirt. Was shown many bugs during this planting. And the location of this project and bringing the students in to do the planting was especially important, just because it increases the awareness. The kids are learning about it, then their parents have to learn about it. This particular project is at the front of the school, so the bus drivers, anyone coming in for sports, is seeing it and learning about it. Next slide, please. When choosing our volunteers and when doing the planting, we always try and consider who's involved in the long-term maintenance of the project. So one of my favorite examples is back in the last project, the head of groundskeeping was so proud of that project, and he participated throughout the process. And afterwards, he would actually call up and ask for, a walkthrough to make sure he was weeding the right plants, make sure he was doing everything he could to take care of it correctly. And since then, he's moved on to a new job and has actually called back to see if there would be any way he could get his school now to start building green stormwater infrastructure there as well. So giving some people some ownership and something to be proud of goes a long way. And next slide, please. Just my final notes. I think Brandy also talked about thinking holistically, but if you want to be a better water citizen, I think that's really key. So try to involve as many segments of your community as possible. Ask yourself if anyone is missing from the conversation that should be there. I especially relate that back to, making sure are the people who are going to be taking care of this project in the room as we're talking about it. And try to consider the project not just as an isolated thing, but as part of a watershed and part of an ecosystem. So this is going to help you ensure that over time your community is scaling up the impact on improving water quality. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Isabella. And so now we're going to turn to questions from the community. So a lot of them are fairly detailed. For example, questions such as, can you point, are we going to share the slides? Yes. Paul, could you just say for everyone how the slides are going to be shared? Or Chris or whoever else wants to jump on?
Yes, we added that information. The session is being recorded, and all information you can find for the next 30 days in this platform.
Great. And then let's see. One question that was asked is, and I encourage people to keep typing them as I go through these, but given all the tremendous number of retention basins that exist that have been built already throughout New Jersey, is there some way to retrofit them to be more green? And what could actually be accomplished there?
I could take that. There's actually an entire...
Marion, there's something wrong with your mic. You sound like a robot. Not that there's anything wrong with that if you want to sound like a robot, but...
Better.
Not really.
Everyone else may mute.
Yep, I could jump in here and say that, yes, retrofitting is definitely a good approach to building these projects. It's very cost effective, and we do a lot of that. Was there a second part to the question?
Marion, your webinar in the Champions program on just how to do this.
So for those of you who don't speak robot, she's saying that in the Champions webinar and in their series, there's a webinar on exactly how to go about doing that, and I believe it was also mentioned that Chris Abrupta and the Rutgers Water Program is a great resource. Another question is, let's see. There's a good discussion in the chat, so I'm just like, I've been reading through it and enjoying it, but I'm trying to distill it. Peggy Gallows brought up an interesting topic, which is maybe not so much as a question, but as a topic for conversation, which is about commodifying water and financial markets and sort of who owns water. I think that's one of the debates that's happening right now. There's a push and pull between public and private water systems that I think deserves some attention, because one of the things that is just to give my own perspective on it, one of the things that we see in a lot of certainly smaller municipalities that don't have a lot of resources is they're not doing a particularly good job managing their water infrastructure. And this is not necessarily a knock that they've done something wrong, but a lot of local governments are extremely strained to manage the basic functions of local government, and the requirements, the technical requirements and the managerial requirements of owning and operating a water utility have continued to get harder. We're learning more about what it takes to be sustainable, the different sources of pollutants, the standards have gotten higher, and so it's difficult. And then another thing that we also see is that public water systems have been chronically underfunded. Politicians tend to think in 4-year and 2-year cycles. They don't want to raise taxes. Raising rates is the same thing as raising taxes, and it's much easier to defer investments for the next mayor or the next electoral cycle. And then what ends up happening is you get a lot of water main breaks and leaks, and a system that actually is extremely expensive to operate. And so if you look at a 10 or a 20-year time horizon, it would have been much cheaper over the lifetime of that horizon for the taxpayers to make those big investments. But in any given year, by not making those investments, you're saving yourself a little bit of short-term money. So public systems have not been particularly good about making those investments, and some private systems have. The other side of the coin, of course, is then water is commodified. The public sector has less say in how and when those investments get made, and then potentially the prices go up. Although I think in terms of the prices going up, that is very much unclear and something to look at on a case-by-case basis, because the devil's in the details of the contracts when you sort of lease or sell. It's usually more leasing. And in many cases, right after a water system is turned over to a public utility, an investor-owned utility, the rates go way up because they're making all those deferred, those backlogged investments. So I think we need to see what those things look like after 20 years compared to like a typical public system. So I think there's some real pros and cons on both sides. And I would also say that one of the things to make public water systems work better is really strong democracy and strong engagement from the state, and oversight from the state, and also from the communities in which they engage. And I would also say like educated engagement, because those contracts can be very detailed. The devil can be in the details. They can hide a lot of stuff, and we need to make sure that communities are negotiating on an equal footing if they are going to bring in an investor-owned utility to manage water. Anybody else want to comment on that topic? No? Okay. Let's see, other questions. Let's see. Isabella, did you already share information on how to get to the rain garden program on your website?
Yes, I did. I can put it into the chat again, just in case.
Great. Andrew Tabas asks, what strategies get people excited about water resources and will turn them into new water citizens? Like, what's a good opening way to engage and really, talk about issues that would matter to people and get them energized?
I mean, I could say, I'll jump in on this question. Like, one of the great things that I'm working on, one of the projects that I'm working on right now is to try to do a graphic novel that kind of outlines like the timeline of the Newark water crisis, the strategies, what's going on, and the information. And so people are like, what do you mean a graphic novel? And I'm like, to me, this is a way to reach communities that we're not hitting within the city of Newark, right? Especially that young demographic that might be more attracted to an anime series than, again, like I said before, like an infographic or an Excel sheet. So that's when I say be creative and be innovative, these are the kinds of strategies that we're employing with our organization. Like for us, nothing's off the table. Like, we will try to get people to understand this issue by any means necessary. Like literally, if we got to do a food drive and talk about the water there, we'll do it there. We've done spoken word events, poetry slams, open mics, just different types of distributions, just different types of events. We had a yoga event where we gave out water from our water box project. So again, we don't have anything off the table because we understand that, society is made up of individuals with different, likes and dislikes. So we have to meet the people where they're at.
I mean, that's fantastic. And that was kind of the thinking that we had when we wanted to do this water story, because we were trying to take the technical information out of the province of like experts and planners and put it in a format that regular people can understand and engage with. Maybe we can team up and you can turn, because I'm sure that our water story would have been better than like your typical master plan or engineering report, and not as good as a graphic novel in terms of like engaging with people. But I would love that. I mean, I can envision it, and I could also envision, like, wouldn't it be awesome if we could get artists to work with people in their water stories so that they could actually do some art, in those plans as they go through that was customized to that community. That would be pretty boss. So maybe we could talk about that. All right. Anyone else want to comment on that, or should I go to the next question?
Sure. Well, just completely on the other side of things, when you make a rain garden, you can have lots of volunteers come out and help plant it and learn how to do it by doing. So this is a little tamer than what you're suggesting, but it does get people outdoors. I learned about native plants. I really, I was a daffodil person. Until I started working with rain gardens. And then I found out there are all these plants that you should be using because they attract pollinators and because they provide habitat for, so it was a complete turnaround for my own understanding of how nature works. And I'm a biologist. So, I think as Anthony was saying, you learn so much by getting involved in these projects.
That's great. Okay, next question from Susan Golden. She asks, do you support homeowners to install rain gardens? I think meaning like us and our specific programs, or is there some other avenue for them to go if they actually want to get a rain garden installed at their home?
I can answer that. You
Yes.
can do it yourself. But, I think what I learned is that it's a lot easier to get an excavator to dig it out than to try to take a shovel and do it yourself. So if you were interested in doing it, I would say get a hold of the Green Infrastructure Champion in your town, and they can help connect you to, there are landscaping companies. There were 20 different businesses, design and landscaping businesses, that were part of the championship program. So there are professionals that can help you with it.
Great. Thank you for that question.
It's often an Eagle Scout project. Now, the Eagle Scouts won't do it on your personal property, but once they're experienced in how to do it, you might be able to hire them to come and help you. So,
if I could just add in there, the Landscape Makeover Program does specifically provide support for homeowners to install rain gardens. So if you follow that link, we're going to have more sessions coming up in the spring that you're welcome to participate in, regardless of whether or not you live in a rebate eligible zone. So we may not be able to give you the rebate, but we can get you the design.
That's great. Okay, Bill Kubler asks, how do you find the right stakeholders, for example, DPW employees, to help you with your projects? And I guess that depends on where the project is, right? Because if it's in your home, I don't know if you could get DPW employees. So maybe backing up a little bit would be, what stakeholders do you need? And then how do you get them to help you with your projects?
I could just say something about the sort of private homeowner and town relationship. Sometimes there'll be a problem with flooding. And one way that the town, if you live in a town with a hill, the people at the top of the hill are often flooding out the people at the bottom of the hill when it rains. So it might be a method that could relieve a problem that the municipality would normally just install a bigger pipe. But if they can do some kind of green infrastructure, that they might be willing to help you install it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Two kind of related questions. Chris Durham asks, what are the best ways to get local officials to pay attention to water problems and focus on them? Because they often don't get addressed in ways that we've discussed. And then Peggy Gallus asks, do you think that local governments could use help in making decisions about what direction to take with their water and sewer systems? And, you know, on the help, I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. I mean, one of the big problems that local governments face, not just in water, but in so many issues, development and redevelopment is another good example, is they're just kind of outclassed and outgunned by big corporations, whether they're developers or, and so they're not kind of negotiating and understanding what's going on in equal footing. And in some cases that causes them to be gun shy and not take advantage of things that can be really helpful. Just a little digression, but in the energy sector, there are really strong state incentives. And this has nothing to do with privatization, but there are really strong energy incentives that are offered by the Board of Public Utilities for local governments to upgrade their municipal buildings and make them more energy efficient. And then also to do, and there's also very lucrative programs in just financing for solar panels and renewable energy. But these are technical long-term contracts. And sometimes local governments just shy away from them because they don't feel that they've got the capacity to really understand what they're signing. And in many cases, it's true. They don't have the capacity to understand what they're signing. And that's so it's a difficult situation. So I don't know. I think they do need help. I guess the question is, who can be the honest broker? I know that they often work with firms, you know, sort of engineering firms and consulting firms that sort of act as the middleman or their advocate. And that's one way to do it. You know, and Peggy, if you want to suggest some things in the chat, that would be great. Anybody else want to comment on any of that?
Yeah, I would add that one of the ways of getting municipal officials interested is to talk to them about the cost savings. So when you're doing things like green stormwater infrastructure and properly managing your stormwater, it's prevention, and it is going to save you money in terms of not managing your flooding problems.
Yep.
And I'll just mention that the members of the DPW are welcome to participate in the Champion program. So these webinars are free, they're online, and that would give them some some of the capacity, the background, to better understand what green infrastructure is and how to implement it and maintain it.
Yep, that's great. A number of people have commented that, you know, NORC is not private and it's doing great. So I just wanted to call that out and give that shout out. And then Peggy Gallus also noted that sometimes the rate increases that follow, you know, either a sale or a long-term lease of a water system are related to covering the cost of acquiring new systems. You know, so like all the expense that they went through to get control of that system, because they're publicly held corporations, obviously the cost of return on investment to shareholders. And so there are definite downsides to both approaches. But I do maintain that it's not always black and white, and there are instances where it can work and be a good thing. But again, those devils are in the difficult details. Gary Brune asks, have community organizations played an important role in getting citizens involved in local water issues? And if so, do you have a good example to share? Well, I think Anthony Diaz is a good example to share, and he did. Does anybody else want to expand on that? No,
I'll also say that, listen, we don't get everything right at the North Water Coalition, but, you know, I think we get more things right than wrong, so that's helpful. But I think, you know, community organizations, like, you're not going to find a Newark Water Coalition in every town in every city, but you will find social justice organizations that can have the capacity to do environmental justice work. And I think it's important, and some things that I share often is like, we need to look for non-traditional partners, right? If you want to do this work within communities, you have to look at who's in that community. And you're not going to find the easy, like, you know, perfect goal alignment organization, but at least find an organization within that community that's willing to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just mention something
please.
about the Rahway River Watershed Association is one of several watershed associations that's working on the River Friendly program, which has a business component in schools and homeowners. So it's a multi-pronged approach to informing people about river-friendly landscaping and practices.
Great. The next question, Catherine Wagner asks, regarding Sustainable Jersey, my green team was told that rain gardens are no longer separately worth points. And that's not true. You just now have to do two. Because, you know, rain gardens, I think it's been a tremendous success story. Rain gardens went from being something that many people had not heard of to being somewhat ubiquitous across New Jersey. And I think from Sustainable Jersey's perspective, we've given out a lot of points to a lot of towns that have done a demonstration rain garden. So what we're trying to say now is it's not enough just to do one. Well, we want you to do now two. And also, because so many have already done one, and then also we want you to start thinking about kind of a broader green infrastructure action plan and strategic plan to basically say, okay, instead of just in an ad hoc way plopping down a rain garden here and a rain garden there, think about what you're trying to achieve in terms of water quality, biodiversity, public health, etc. And then think about, okay, how many rain gardens do we need and where and what kind, to try to start thinking about the goals that you're trying to achieve with it. But having said that, rain gardens, still good, still get a thumbs up from Sustainable Jersey. Jerry Flack just makes a comment that art remains essential to creativity, transforming our communities. And this is, I think, in the context of graphic novels. And I think there's a lot of support for this idea of figuring out how we can use sort of guerrilla marketing, art, and creativity to do a better job of including people, giving them more pathways to be included in decisions and understanding what's happening. Let's see. Another question is, do we think the pandemic has affected or is going to affect community approaches to green infrastructure? Panel?
Well, we don't know yet, but I'm really hopeful that, and maybe like purposefully hopeful, I have no reason to hope for it, that people will be open to preparing in advance of a problem, and maybe that will help them to address their stormwater and flooding issues before it gets really bad. That's my hope.
Yeah.
I'll say prior to me moving, I lived in West Orange and right by the South Mountain Reservation. And so during the lockdown, you would see floods of people going to, have picnics, being outdoors. And before the lockdown, nobody went there. I shouldn't say nobody, but it just wasn't a lot of people there. So what I've seen was this focus on like the outdoors, nature, and green spaces, right? How these spaces are vital when you can't go anywhere else. These are the places that, folks can commune with. And my hope was that, when things open back up, that people would still recognize the importance of green and natural spaces. And I think that, I think some folks have. I think, it's easy to kind of get lost in the sauce again. But I think it was vitally important for folks to really be out there and understand why these spaces are important and why these spaces need to be preserved and how we need to build more of them.
Great. I want to share a comment in the chat, which I think is important. Peggy Gallos notes that there's a new New Jersey peer-to-peer water utility network, and specifically it's trying to be a resource, and that unbiased resource that I mentioned, to any local government that needs help. There's no cost. It's simply local government utilities trying to help each other and learn from each other. And so that's really fantastic. I'm glad to know about that. Chris Sturm asks what strategies to use when local officials aren't responsive. And, I'll start, and I'll just note from Sustainable Jersey's perspective, we work with the local governments. So, that is our unit that we work with, for better and worse. There's a lot that you can't accomplish if you can't get the local government to get along. On the other hand, if the local government's not interested, you're stymied. And we field a lot of calls from people who want advice on how to force the local government really to get involved. And we don't have an action on that, and it's not on our website, but we do trainings and workshops and other stuff to people on how to be effective at the local level. And that deals with politics, that deals with knowing how to show up to local meetings and to talk publicly in front of the council and make your points, how to try to wrangle yourself onto boards and commissions. And, again, if it comes to it, how to run for office, how to put political pressure on people to make a difference. And I'm proud to say that every election season we see Sustainable Jersey becoming essentially a major political issue, where you see local politicians touting the progress they made or fending off attacks from people who are dissatisfied with the progress that they've made. And I think that's the way it should be. So anybody else want to field that?
I just think that working with the community to build that support from the ground up, and if the officials don't want to work with you, work with the schools, work with whoever will work with you, and start generating that interest. And, eventually politicians will see that to keep their job, they got to support this.
Yep.
I would also say it's hard to ignore people with bullhorns. But I think there's any tactics you can use. Nothing's off the table. Again, different people respond differently to different things. We've done letter writing campaigns. We've done protests. We've had meetings with local officials, just being open and receptive to having that conversation and trying to trust the process of every level, right? The hyper-local city councilmen or district leaders in your town or your city, all the way up to state and federal officials. So it's just not one thing, and somebody will respond to you eventually, but you just have to really try the process and trust, fling as many noodles at the wall as you can and see what sticks.
Yeah.
I think that's good advice.
That's good advice. And, the biggest thing, show up. You got to show up. So another question is, can we regulate? And by the way, I'll answer this question. I just want to note, people are popping in lots of great resources on the chat. I'm going to try to give them all a shout out as we go through, but I encourage people to look at them. So next question is, can we regulate new development to reduce the amount of impervious surface by a certain amount, and therefore reduce the amount of runoff? So I've got plenty to say on that, but I'll give the first crack to the rest of the panelists.
The DEP has actually done some of that work for us by having new rules for development, but that development it's major development. So towns, but local communities have complete power to make their own ordinances that are stronger than the DEP ordinances. So you just have to convince them to do it.
So
how do you do it?
Yeah, no, that's it. And the Sustainable Jersey has that ordinance for you to pass. And the DEP, I don't know if it was 10 years ago, but they came out with new stormwater rules that were much more restrictive than the previous ones. And most municipalities did not implement them. In some cases, it was willful. In some cases, it was just like it was over their heads. It was hard and it was technical. And the DEP didn't have the resources to really be in every town to enforce it. And now we have new stormwater rules that just rolled out that are even more restrictive. Again, smaller developments fall under the radar of this. So if it's a larger development, they're going to have to, the towns are required to enforce on the developers rules that make them manage all of their water kind of on site. Like no bad runoff is kind of the goal. Those aren't technical terms, but but it remains to be seen how well local governments are going to be able to enforce those rules. Again, either because they don't want to, because they disagree with them and they like the developers and they don't care about the environment, which happens, or because it's just a bunch of volunteers and a part-time, planner, and they just can't get it done. This is hard stuff. So they're going to need help. They're going to need help from us. They're going to need help from Jersey Waterworks and ANJAC and Pinelands Preservation Alliance and others to really figure out how we can build their capacity to perform that role. And then they can also pass the Sustainable Jersey ordinance, which was developed with the Watershed Institute and ANJAC and a bunch of others to New Jersey Future and Jersey Waterworks, among others, which again tries to raise the bar by capturing even more of the development. So we're not having all those smaller developments fall through the cracks, which collectively have just as big an impact as a big development. So there you go. With that, we are 2 minutes until the end. Again, I encourage everyone to check out all the resources that Jersey Waterworks has. They've got between Jersey Waterworks and New Jersey Future, a tremendous number of guides that are available on their websites that answer many of these questions. Partner organizations such as the Rutgers Water Resources Program, and ANJAC, Pinelands. There's a lot of great stuff out there. I encourage people to check it out. And also I encourage people to, if you have not already, become a member of Jersey Waterworks. You can do that at various levels. You can sort of just join, which enables you to stay involved and hear what's going on and lend your name to support of the organization. Or you can join a committee and you can really dig in figuring out and implementing the solutions that will make a difference in all of these towns. I'd like to thank all of you for taking a little time out of your evenings to learn how you could be more effective in making the world a better place. And I'd like to thank all the panelists for their time and also for the work that you have done and are doing that made you worthy of being a panelist. So please keep it up.
Thank you, Randy, for moderating.
Thank you. You're welcome. And I think that's it. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow for day 3, where we're going to have affordable funding approaches for combined sewer solutions, using data to build trust. So trust in our water systems and how do we get it right? And again, we talked a lot about that today, is how do people really understand what's going on, who's a credible source? And finally, building a water workforce. What's the pipeline of people that can benefit from building all these pipelines that we have to build, and who's going to get those jobs. And so with that, I'll return 1 minute early the balance of your evening to you all. Thank you all so much. Good night.